Hello and welcome back to the F2 show. What an action-packed weekend of motorsport in Jeddah. 5 safety cars, 2 red flags, a double winner, and that's just Formula 2. Formula 2 delivered yet again, and obviously joining us to discuss everything is Inside F2 editor LA Wilshaw and Inside F2 writers Ed Spencer and Lawrence Griffin. Coming up on the show then, we dissect all of the drama from a chaotic weekend of Formula 2 action. 4 rookies took to the track for the first time this weekend. We discuss our rookie of the week. And Oscar Piastri took another step closer to the Formula 2 title. We take a look at the championship standings off the back of this weekend. But before all of that, obviously a bit of a chaotic feature race in Formula 2. So let's clarify the result for you. Oscar Piastri wins his second race of the weekend ahead of Robert Schwartzman and Ralph Boschung, who gets his first podium in Formula 2 after 5 years. Well done to him. Obviously, our championship contender, Guan Yu Zhou, finished 4th ahead of his UNI Virtuosi teammate, Felipe Drugovich. Yuri Vips, Christian Lingard and Marcus Armstrong round out the top 8. Liam Lawson and Dan Ticktum 9th and 10th. And obviously only half points were awarded for the race due to the amount of laps that we've done. And obviously a chaotic start of that race as well due to the collision obviously involving Teo Pourchaire and Enzo Fittipaldi. We hope that they're okay. We wish them well because that was obviously quite a nasty shunt. I think I've done enough talking now. So LA, let's come to you first. What did you make of it all?
I honestly just don't know where to start. I really don't. What a sort of action-packed, crazy, but exciting, but disappointing weekend as well, for many, many reasons that obviously we're going to talk about during this podcast. But, I think if I get my stats right, and Ed's the stat man really, but then there were 3 restarts in sprint race 1, 3 restarts in sprint race 2. We had 2 red flags today in the feature race. And how we're going to pick this apart
it's basically impossible, isn't it? It's basically impossible, but we're going to give it a go. Crazy weekend. Lawrence, obviously first time in Jeddah. We spoke on the preview about the track and about what we could expect. How did it match compared to, what you imagined it to be like and how it's actually ended up this weekend?
I think it was probably quite similar to what we first assumed. Exciting racing, but perhaps slightly on the dangerous side, and plenty of opportunities for there to be incidents, and that's exactly like what we got. Just like LA has just mentioned, with the amount of restarts we had, it was chaotic, and that element of peril did cause issues with the amount of incidents we had, sort of interrupting the flow of the race at times. The start of the feature race being delayed due to the repairs to the walls on the exit of turn 13, 14. That was really disappointing. That wasn't ideal ahead of the feature race. That basically removed any tolerance in the time schedule for red flags once proceedings got underway in the feature race. And with the length of the feature race and the track being how it was, that was always possible for that to happen. So that was a real shame. So I think it was slightly marred by that element, but it did give us some exciting racing and plenty of action, although perhaps not as much as we might have had on a more conventional circuit, just because of the amount of times it was interrupted. I have mixed feelings about this track now, I'd say.
It definitely was, great racing at times, but also frustrating, wasn't it? Ed, were you a little bit frustrated, especially the feature race? It's disappointing not to get the feature race kind of underway, or got underway properly. I mean, we had 10 minutes really of racing, didn't we?
It was annoying, but everyone got out of their car safe and sound, and that's the main thing, especially with considering what happened to both Enzo and Teo, and we wish them all the best in their recoveries tonight. It was a bit like F2 meeting bumper cars at the fun fair. Everyone seemed to be crashing into each other. Everyone seemed to be banging into each other. It was nuts, and it's really been the story of the whole weekend. Big accidents. We had accidents in practice. Samir and De Leather had crashed into each other a couple of times. We had Armstrong getting punted off by Novalak. And of course, the feature race, which was nearly not even started because of an issue, I believe there's something to do with race control. And then the race itself, which barely started. We had a few clean laps of racing before we had a safety car, and then we had another safety car. Mental, to put it quite put it quite frankly, was a mental feature race and probably one of the craziest of the F2 era, considering that, in GP2 this was the norm. And particularly, I remember in Abu Dhabi when there was a massive pile-up and the race got completely cancelled. So it was like a return to the old days.
Yeah, it really was crazy, wasn't it? Let's take a look at the driver's standings then off the back of this weekend, heading into the last rounds next weekend. Oscar Piastre extends his lead at the top even further to 51.5 points. Obviously, the half point given out today, and he can win the title in Abu Dhabi. Robert Schwartzman jumps ahead of Guan Yu Zhou into second in the championship after a tough weekend for the Chinese driver. Eventful weekend for Dan Ticktum, Tao Pourchaire. We're going to talk about them in a minute, but they round out the top 5. In the team standings, the result of the feature race meant that Prema won the 2021 team standings. A massive congratulations to them, and that's 2 years in a row for them as well. So huge congratulations to them, thoroughly well deserved. But it's still all to play for, with Carlin, UNI and High Tech all still hopeful they can secure second place in the team standings. Okay, let's start with Oscar Piastri then. Obviously, everything just keeps on falling into place for him, doesn't it, LA? He's looking like, well, he's almost there, isn't he?
Yeah, of course, he's almost there. He's got his sort of hands almost on that trophy. And I think it has looked pretty certain for him for quite a long time, the latter part of the season, because he just seems to be the most consistent driver, no matter what's thrown at him. But, he's had the 5 wins in Bahrain, Monza, Sochi, and the 2 this weekend in Jeddah. And he's had his P3 at Silverstone, his P2s, double at Monaco, Baku, which is 9 podiums at the end of the day. And these are the stats that then add up to you becoming the champion. I think there's only been one race, again, this is Ed's territory, that he's been out of the points, and that was Bahrain, and one retirement as well in Baku. So, the stats speak for themselves. He's obviously going to be champion, and he's going to be a rookie champion. And as we know, there's only Charles Leclerc and George Russell that have achieved this massive feat before. And, and I think it's really good that we've got another potential F1 world champion here, because at the end of the day, we know Charles Leclerc's a potential F1 champion, and we know that George Russell is, even though he's not quite had the opportunity to show everybody what he can do yet. So, Oscar's definitely in following the right path here for his own dreams into Formula One.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the thing, Ed, isn't it? It's the progression that Oscar Piastri is showing. Obviously, wins the Formula 3 championship, doesn't get a pole in that season. But here he is, rocks up 4 poles in a row. He's obviously, won, the last 3 weekends, a double win this weekend. He just keeps getting better and better, doesn't he? And that's what you want from a Formula 2 driver, someone that's learning all the time and someone that then is progressing all the time.
Definitely. And Formula One has George Russell as Mr. Saturday, Oscar Piastri's F2's answer, and is really Mr. Friday. He's been outstanding since the word go. He's got adapted to that car fairly quickly. And bar Bahrain, which was a bit of a challenging first weekend, he has been rock solid since then. Ever since Silverstone, he's almost looked unbeatable. And if you look at the rookie champions, if you combine GP2 and F2, the likes of Rosberg, Hamilton, Leclerc, Russell, they've all gone on to be amazing drivers in Formula One. And he's on the right trajectory. It's a shame that Alpine, unfortunately, there's no room for him next year in Formula One, but I think he can be definitely proud about how he's moved up the ranks, and he's in a good place for 2023 and beyond. And I think he will be a future world champion. Where he goes in 2023, I don't know, but he's been outstanding since Silverstone, and I think he's a very worthy champion when he does eventually get that name engraved on the World Championship trophy.
How close is he, Lawrence? Is it, one hand, a hand and a half? How close is he? And when he does win the championship, I say when, we're assuming that he's not going to be caught now. Where would you rank him in, compared to other Formula 2 champions? We talk about obviously George Russell, Charles Leclerc there. Where does he rank?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, if it's a bit like he's got 2 hands on the trophy and it's his, really. A meteorite might hit him, but otherwise it's his. Yeah, it's, to put in another analogy, it's like a snooker game. He's 51.5 points ahead with 65 points still on the table, and all of the balls in the exact right position for you to clear up. And that's exactly what he's going to do. There's potential mathematically for it to all go horribly wrong. And with the format that we have, if he has a total disaster in qualifying in Abu Dhabi, if he were to crash, or if he were to get a puncture, just like Dan Ticktum got this weekend, that could lead potentially to a pointless weekend for him. But even then, Schwartzman or Zhou would have to have an absolutely perfect weekend. Schwartzman would have to have a near perfect weekend to be able to overhaul that deficit. So I think it's almost certain now for Piastre, but yeah, it's not over until it's over. In terms of how Piastri would rank, I think he would rank right up there with the likes of George Russell and Leclerc. I think you could have a strong argument to put him above all of those drivers. Exactly what you were saying there with the progression, to go from not having pole positions to having 4 consecutive pole positions in Formula 2, to learn at such a rate and to have that consistency and to deliver throughout a season that's been so broken up with gaps in the calendar. That shows real maturity, and that process of learning long term is what could make him a Formula One world champion. That's what everybody sees in Russell and his maturity and how he goes about his work. So I think Piastri is at the very least, in terms of his talent, up there with the likes of a Leclerc or a Russell. And yeah, I agree. I expect him to win a world championship one day if everything goes right for him. Good drivers before have been stopped from getting to the highest level of Formula One. I hope that doesn't happen to him, but we can only wait and see.
Yeah, and obviously in terms of his title rivals, Robert Schwartzman has become his closest rival, if you like. A good weekend for him, making him the number one contender, LA, even if we're saying it's not really a contender, but he has moved second in the championship, hasn't he?
He has. I mean, we all know the bright start that he made last season, the dark horse that came, and I had him as a dark horse as well, because I'd received some inside tips there. I mean, we all know that he was F3 champion, of course, but, I'd received some tips on how good, great he was. And that went to show, in last season. And it was a shame, really, that he didn't sort of finish higher, and he had a few issues in a few different races that we know about and we talked about last year. But yeah, absolutely. Again, this season, he's right on the heels of Oscar Piastri. He's only had 2 retirements this season. He's only finished 2 races out of the points this season. He's had some bad qualifying sessions, also not so good qualifying results, which is possibly why he isn't leading. But you sort of think ifs and buts. If he'd have had better qualifying sessions, would he actually be leading this championship right now? And I kind of think the answer is yes. He's raced 16 races in the points this season, and that's again mammoth. That's a championship winning statistic, if you like. It's just that Oscar's just done that a little bit better because he's not been as unlucky. Or Robert mentioned something about there were issues, it seemed to indicate might be even sort of car purposes rather than personal reasons of why he's not qualified that well. And as soon as they started to understand the issues for qualifying, he's got better. So yeah, if it wouldn't be a surprise to me next weekend, if what's just been said, Oscar has a no points weekend the whole weekend, and what's going to happen? We're all going to get slapped in the face with Robert Schwartzman winning the championship.
Can you imagine? You're right, though, that it's qualifying that has let him down a little bit, hasn't it? So I'm sure, I mean, we don't know what Robert Schwartzman was going to do for next year. We would love to see him back in Formula 2. And if he was back in Formula 2, I think that's where he probably needs to work on, in qualifying to make that happen. Ed, obviously, Guan Yu Zhou, it's not been a great weekend for him, has it? Obviously, was spun round at, corner 1, 2, in between the both, really. This weekend. Is he buckling under the pressure a little bit? Is that a bit harsh?
Does he? But my argument would be, does he have any pressure? I think he doesn't, because he's got a Formula One driver in his back pocket. He knows that regardless of what happens, he's going to race in Formula One next year. He's achieving his dream, and I think the pressure is off. But this weekend was pretty dismal. The incidents at turn one with, I believe it was Lingard, was him trying too hard and seeing a gap that wasn't there, and of course it ruined his race, and it ruined his second sprint race, and he didn't really have a chance to make his way through the field in the feature. So definitely his worst weekend to date, although Sochi was hardly anything to shout home about. But I don't feel the pressure is getting to him. I think he's accepted he's probably not going to win the championship because Piastre, as we've said, is so far ahead that only a miracle such as, possibly Christ the Redeemer turning up on the track on Sunday morning and stopping him would stop Oscar Piastri from winning the championship. But I feel that he doesn't have that much pressure anymore. He probably knows that he's going to be second or third, and I think he's accepted that. And I think he knows that whatever happens, you're doing something what Piastri, Schwartzman, Lingard aren't doing, and that's moving up to Formula One. So I don't think he has that worry anymore.
Yeah, I hope he has a good final weekend in Formula 2 next weekend, because obviously been in the Formula in the category for 3 years now. So we wish him all the best. And obviously 2 very mixed weekends for Théo Pourchaire and Dan Ticktum. Obviously we said at the top that we hope Théo Pourchaire is okay after a bit of a nasty incident, but he showed he had pace again in qualifying and one of the sprint races. He was doing well until obviously he crashed. And Dan Ticktum was not a great qualifying, but again, he was fighting his way back, wasn't he, Lawrence?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. First and foremost, what matters more than anything else is that Théo Pourchaire is okay. It looked like a serious incident, and I really hope that he is safe and well where he's being treated. But yeah, he qualified an excellent third on Friday. Really impressive performance. There's a lot of challenges with learning a new track. As somebody as young as him, first season in the sport. But yeah, of course, that crash in the sprint race, really made his weekend more complicated. Although he staged a great comeback in the second sprint race, and then it could be built into a picture of a really good weekend overall as he lines up P3 in the feature race. But of course, he stalls and isn't involved in that terrible incident. In terms of Ticktum's weekend, that puncture really cost him, and that's a real shame for him, because who knows what he might have been able to do without that. Again, he did well to recover, move up to 7th in the first sprint race, and then got a really good 4th place in the second sprint race. There was a lunge on Jack Doohan going into the final turn, which really made me hold my breath at first. It was an enormous lunge, but he got it stopped brilliantly and made a wonderful pass, and then ended up 10th in that absolute mess of a feature race. So yeah, overall quite a good weekend, and he's now 4th in the overall standings and within touching distance of Guan Yu Zhou. And who would have imagined that the driver going to Formula One next season is at risk of being overtaken by a driver who was never really in the conversation for a Formula One seat after he's dropped by Williams. So as he moves over in the future to Formula E, I think that would be really satisfying for him as an illustration of the talent that he's got, if he were able to climb up to 3rd in the championship. And he really does have an opportunity to do that. He has the pace, and Zhou over the last couple of rounds has looked a bit shaky. The consistency in his performance just hasn't been there. So yeah, he'll look forward to take advantage of that situation.
Yeah, it's all right, LA. We won't talk too much about Dan Ticktum moving on, because we don't want to upset you with too much. But exactly. But obviously, yeah, Théo Pourchaire, he's been in the wars this year, hasn't he? Obviously, a wrist injury earlier on in the year, and then today. So wishing him well, wishing Enzo Fittipaldi well as well. Sticking with you, Lawrence, our other winner this weekend, Marcus Armstrong, had a brilliant start to sprint race 1. Obviously, didn't he? Dive down the inside of Liam Lawson, and a great drive, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. It was a brilliant move up the insides. The first race start, a new track, the first time heading into turn one in that manner, on all of the dust on the inside. We've seen so many incidents at this track with how narrow it is and so many turn one incidents. Of course, he ended up crowding Liam Lawson off the circuit potentially a little bit, but that's always going to happen with a car on the outside there. Yeah, we maybe felt this sort of performance was due for Armstrong. He's not had the best season, and I think there's always been a feeling that he has that talent in the bag, and so I'm really glad for him that he could finally deliver on that. Of course, then he was quite unfortunate to be taken out in the second sprint race by Clement Novalak, I believe, and ended up 8th. And started 9th in the feature race after what had been a good qualifying for him. So again, slightly unfortunate weekend, but yeah, the way in which he performed in that first sprint race, that move up the inside, that was crucial. So that was really nice to see from Armstrong.
Yeah, really good weekend for him. And as you say, he's obviously got a lot of talent and hasn't quite shown it this year. So really good for him. And another person, probably in a similar kind of bracket, really, Jehan Daruvla, obviously led for so long in the second sprint race. Was pipped to it by Oscar Piastre in the end. Obviously, he was penalised for going off the track at turn one and obviously keeping that position, LA. Do you think that was a bit harsh?
No, I don't. I think, unfortunately, rules are rules. And I think when Jehan looks at the video later on the way to Abu Dhabi, I think he'll realise that as harsh as it is, it was the fair penalty. He gained an advantage by going off the track at turn one, and he didn't give the position up to Oscar until later on in the race. So, unfortunately, it is what it is for him. He drove a great race, but that lockup cost him dearly, and it's been really the story of Daruvla's season, that he's had the pace on his day, he can really show it, but he just doesn't quite have the luck, or he gets himself into some rather sticky situations. Silverstone being a prime example where he made contact with Bent Viscal. Unfortunately, it was just one of those days for him.
Do you agree, LA? Do you think that's do you think the penalty was fair enough?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he wasn't the only one to be warned or to receive, something about it. You can't just leave the track and gain an advantage across both the formulas. That's been quite apparent this weekend. So yeah, unfortunately, sorry, Jehan, but you gained an advantage, and you got your 5-second penalty, and it did drop him all the way down, which was a sort of a shame. It was a big punishment, but again, if you gain the advantage, then it's a punishment for the person you've got ahead of. So obviously that's the reason for it. But just really quickly, because I know I can't leave this alone, but big congratulations to Armstrong, and it was such a shame, the win that that he got on the sprint race 1, and then to then be out in sprint race 2 was absolutely heartbreaking. So I'm really sorry for him for that, after he actually showed, he got his elbows out in that sprint race and showed what an amazingly great driver he is. And I'm gutted to be losing Dan Ticktum. I do feel he's a Formula One driver. He is possibly the unluckiest Formula 2 driver and Formula 1 driver I've ever seen in my life. He really is. And he takes it on the chin. He does a lot of moaning. We all know that. We all love his radio pieces, or you love it or you hate it. But the guy is an absolute raw talent. He storms through that field. He comes Baku, Jeddah this weekend. He's absolutely taking these terrifying fast circuits, and he's still making the most of that bad qualifying this weekend, and look where he's finished in the points. So it's like, pat on the back. Sorry to lose him. Going over to Formula E, hopefully there may still be a little bit of a road to F1 for him at some point, and we'll see him again.
Yeah, obviously, best of luck to Dan Ticktum. We're certainly going to miss him. LA is definitely going to miss him. And another person that we're obviously going to be missing and losing, unfortunately, at the end of the season is Christian Lingard. He, again, had a penalty, a similar kind of penalty, actually, there's Jehan Daruvla. It's really difficult, isn't it, with that complex of circuit, if you like, where you run off the road, you maybe outbrake yourself a little bit and you go off there. Obviously, defending against Bent Viscal. Shout shout out to Ben Biscow, by the way, a podium again this weekend. Brilliant result for him. But yeah, obviously disappointing for Lingard, Ed.
Yeah, disappointing considering this was probably one of his best weekends of the season. I think, unfortunately, if Jehan got a penalty for something like that, then Christian had to get one as well, because you can't have double standards when you are deciding which drivers get penalties and which don't. It's not, you don't want to look biased. And unfortunately for Christian, his defending of Ben Viscal was considered to be, wrong, and the stewards gave him the correct penalty. It's a shame because, as I've said, he's having the best weekend of the season, arguably since Bahrain, in what's been a pretty miserable season, and he will have some confidence going into IndyCar in 2022. And I think that if luck had gone his way, Lingard might be challenging Piastre for the championship, although we'll never know. It'll probably be something we'll be discussing here in 20, 30 years. What could Lingard have done if he had if the luck had gone his way?
There's loads of drivers we could say that about, isn't there? And Christian Lingard is definitely one. And someone we're not going to be saying about that this weekend, for probably the first time in a long time, is Ralph Boschung, a podium after 5 years in Formula 2. Congratulations to Ralph Boschung. I'm gutted that we haven't got the head of the Ralph Boschung fan club, Jim Kimberley, with us today. But Lawrence, over to you. Massive well done to Ralph Boschung, right? Thoroughly deserved.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's great to see that. I think everyone will be pleased to see Ralph up on the podium finally after such a long time. And he's not had an easy journey in this sport. So many times he's had issues with funding. So the fact that he's managed to prevail against that to get to this point and achieve a podium today, I think that's brilliant for him. He has been delivering this season. He's had some really good drives and some impressive results. He had an awful first sprint race. Perhaps issues with managing the tyres. Made it back to P9 in sprint race 2. Was finally rewarded for years of efforts in his feature race. And also rewarded for that great qualifying position, which allowed him to make up those positions. It's really, really good to see that from Ralph Boschung, and that will give him confidence going into the final round. And then also with having his seat confirmed for next season, I think it's a situation where if he can be a bit more secure in that seat next season, if there aren't the same financial worries, then that could really do great things for his performance. We've seen, for several drivers, when they get 2-year contracts as opposed to 1 year, when they have a bit more certainty in their future, how their performance can come on leaps and bounds. So hopefully we can see that in Ralph soon.
Yeah, hopefully the first of many. You know what I thought was typical was Ralph Boschung finally gets a podium in Formula 2. We didn't actually get to see it because the race kind of finished bang on when Formula 1 was starting, or the programme was starting. I mean, we definitely didn't see it on Sky Sports. I don't know whether it was shown on F1 TV or not, but typical for Ralph Boschung that was. But there you go. Let's move and talk about the battle of the rookies then. Obviously, not necessarily the rookies for the overall season, but the rookies for this weekend. 4 new rookies this weekend in Formula 2, obviously making the step up from Formula 3. And Jack Doohan probably had the standout weekend, didn't he? How impressed were you by him, LA?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's done the F3 season, as we know, for Trident, and he's been really, really successful in that. He came a very close second at the end to Dennis Haug, and he was only 26 points away from winning that championship himself. So, don't underestimate this young rookie that we just got, well, unofficially a rookie that we've just acquired in Formula 2. He's a good driver, and we all know that. It's good to see him at MP Motorsports. And do we know if he's actually going to be with us next season in Formula 2, or is that being confirmed? Are we just going to see him for this couple of weekends?
There's public, I think Auto Hebdo have rumoured that he'll be going to, I believe it'll be Virtuosi, although don't quote me on that. It's the rumours are swirling around.
All right, well, it'd be good. It'd be good, to see him. I mean, even in practice, he got 11th, which is quite admirable, in the middle of all the other guys, bang in the middle. Qualified 16th, not amazing. But then, and got his 11th in sprint race 1, but got a P5 in sprint race 2, and, got some points in his first race. What's not there to like?
Yeah, great weekend from Jack Doohan. Looking forward to seeing him back, hopefully next season. And obviously 3 other rookies in the field. Ed, Logan Sargent, who had a difficult weekend up until the feature race. A little bit of him in the feature race, didn't we? Making a couple of moves. Ollie Caldwell, who had a difficult weekend, and Clement Novalak, who had a pretty eventful weekend, didn't he? A good qualifying session, hit the wall in sprint race 2, locked the rears. Difficult weekend for maybe all 3 of them, Ed.
A real baptism of fire for all 3 drivers. Novalak had a good qualifying, but kind of threw it away with that clumsy attempt on Armstrong in sprint race 2. Apart from that, a decent weekend for him. Caldwell wiped out in feature race with that accident with Samaya. Not really much he could have done to avoid him, and it was a bit of a difficult weekend from then on. Difficult weekend from him anyway, considering he was near the back. Sargent, the pressure was really off him. I think he knows that he's going somewhere a little bit quicker next year than HWA. And, a real nightmare start by crashing in practice. He had 1 goal, and that was beat Alessio De Leder, and he did just that. And, I think he will take the lessons learned from this weekend into Abu Dhabi. I think, he didn't have a particularly good weekend, but it's all about learning, and he'll be better prepared for Abu Dhabi. So all 3 have had a pretty rough ride, but I think they'll come back stronger in a week's time.
You learn from your mistakes, right, Lawrence? It's a learning curve for them all.
Yeah, definitely. And the great thing for those drivers is they get to have that learning curve now, this weekend and next weekend. They get a whole winter to go away with the teams and do proper preparation for next season, by which time they should be ready and up and running. We've seen what rookies can do in their first season of Formula 2 with the way that Oscar Piastri has performed. Like LA said, Jack Doohan in particular is a real talent. So with this sort of head start with these 2 races, these guys can hopefully put together a really solid Formula 2 season next year.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing them with us next year then. Okay, that's all we have time for today. Thank you to Lawrence, to LA, and to Ed for joining us on today's show. Thanks to you guys at home for joining us as well. If you've enjoyed the show, please make sure you give it a like, subscribe for more of the F2 show and loads of other stuff that we do. Keep an eye out for our preview of Abu Dhabi, we get there, Abu Dhabi next week, which will be out at the early part of next week. So keep an eye out for that. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.